Hello and welcome. Let's not beat around the bush too much because I want to make this video both the unboxing and the full review in one. It is very clear to see exactly what we have in front of us. It is the Elcan Specter DR 1-4 in FDE. This was graciously sent in by ATI, Advanced Technologies Incorporated, more specifically Dave. Many months ago, I reached out to Dave to try to get my hands on their size 6 1:6 first focal plane LPVO and got it within a couple of days. So I assume he liked what I did with that because this just showed up at my door without them even saying, hey, by the way, you have a package inbound. Needless to say, Dave, thank you very much for finding my channel worthy enough for you to send me stuff like this. And I'm sure all of you viewers out there are appreciative of that. So thank you very much. What do we have here? We have perhaps the most unassuming box I've ever seen. Probably even more unassuming than what SWFA has to offer. It is just a small white box, but this little sticker on top tells us everything we need to know. Clearly, it is an Elcan Specter DR, dual purpose, 5.56, FDE, and made in Canada. If you're unfamiliar with what a Specter is, it's basically two prisms packed into one package for around $2 grand. It's not terrible. What comes inside the box is also pretty scarce. We have a standard CR2032 battery, and a really nice little plastic battery compartment opener. These are awesome, so this way you don't have to worry about messing up your anodizing. You also get a cleaning pen, an operation manual, and then the optic itself. Before we get to the optic, let's just flip through this real quick and see what we have going on. There isn't a whole lot to this thing that is really going on. It's a very simple optic, and simple is nice. 2 3/4 inches of eye relief. I'll see how close I can actually get to that. Because my limitations with prisms, I don't have full finite control with the eye relief just yet. Maybe my Mark IV mount will have something along those lines. And this is going to give you all the information you're going to need to know. There is our reticle. Good little way of figuring out your proper eye relief. How to adjust your windage and your elevation. Now this is kind of interesting because the way you adjust your windage and elevation isn't through the internal components of the optic. It's actually external. So the optic itself and the mount are two different components technically, and then the adjustments just tweak how the optic sits in the mount. And that's about it. You can go through this much more in depth slowly if you'd like, but I want to get to this, the meat and potatoes of this package. First off, this isn't what I would consider FDE. This is more of a brown, but I don't mind this color not one bit. I love earth tones. I think they're fantastic and probably the most universal of gun colors that would work in almost any environment. I said most, didn't say all. All the laser engraving is beautiful. Very sharp, easy to read. Absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot to talk about this, so let's start with the base itself. These are ARM's QD levers, and I haven't got my hands on these before, and I have to say, these are already vastly superior than what you'd find in LaRue. Primarily because you have these little hardened steel guides. So this will go on your pick rail, and then all of the leverage comes through the arm and locks it in place. Very similar to what we saw with LaRue, except we have hard steel riding on hard steel, which is pressing against the pick rail, so you don't have to worry about damaging your pick rail every time you lock this on and off. Very nice. The action on it is very smooth and very well damped, and as you'll see soon, this thing locks up really, really tight. What else do we have on the bottom? We have a single lock for the pick rail, and that's basically it. It's pretty simple as far as that goes. These holes over here are so this way you can lock these arms in and then put a zip tie through this so you don't have to worry about these things coming loose on you in the field. I like attention to detail like that. Technically, it doesn't make it a quick release at that point, but if you're ever worried about this thing coming loose on something that, let's say, recoils like a son of a bitch, like a machine gun, 2 zip ties through there, and you don't have to worry about this thing coming off unless you want it to. As far as the optic goes, it comes with, of course, Tenebrex caps because Tenebrex is made by ATI and they're a Canadian company. So I would expect nothing less. They are very closely matched to the overall anodizing of this thing, and again, look absolutely fantastic. Of course, just like any other cap, you can remove them very easily in case you don't want to run them. One thing you might not realize this thing comes with is a kill flash. And I have to say, thankfully, it can come unscrewed. Because when you're looking through this thing, no matter how you cut it, You see a lot of this thing, especially at 1x. At 4x, not so much because you see through it, but at 1x, this thing is very visible. I'm sure it works great to kill flash on it, but in my use of it so far, as you'll see, it's pretty apparent. Now, the overall weight of this thing feels a little bit heavier in hands than what I'd probably expect. My light is just in the wrong way. Now, the overall weight of this thing feels a little bit heavier than I would expect, and you might as well. 22 ounces naked without any of the accessories. If you're going the full Monty, about 23.5 ounces is a fair amount of weight. The only thing I have that I could really showcase is a Primary Arms PLX-C and an ADM mount. And as you could see, it's just about the same weight. But you get twice the magnification and a little bit more flexibility with this than you do with this. This, however, does have some pretty cool features up its sleeves. Like I said earlier, your windage and your elevation controls are external, and as you can see, there is a gap that you're supposed to have on either side of this to get it perfectly centered. And as far as the back goes, you just have a line back there and a lock. This little silver lock comes down, so this way you could rotate this. If you don't loosen that first, you can break this, so don't do that. Using the provided tool, we're going to take a look under the battery compartment. Got a big old spring on top. Yes, that is a Holosun battery. That is just what I had lying around. And we have a pretty interesting looking pad in there. I've never seen anything like this before. We have two little spring pads in the middle and an isolation ring. So this is made out of some sort of plastic material. I'm sure just to prevent it from grounding out, but it makes no sense because you're supposed to ground out the battery. And then you actually have a spring on the cap that looks kind of like what you'd find on like a really inexpensive sort of primary arms. Very clear to see off indicated on the side with a line on the knob itself. You can clearly see we have a couple of brightness settings on top, but also a couple underneath. These are for just the center dot, and it gets nuclear bright. These are for the rest of the reticle and the crosshair as a whole, for using in lower light environments and if you want to see the drops illuminated, which is a really, really cool feature. And because this is basically a prism, the reticle is on the second focal plane, whereas the controls for the actual magnification are technically a completely different unit. So this is always going to be visible to the eye no matter what setting you're in, or even if this breaks. Another nice feature that you might not realize this thing has are little integrated iron sights. A little hard to pick up, but they're there. It's a little bit too close of a sight radius, especially when this thing only has less than 3 inches of eye relief. So from this to your eye should be about 3 inches. It's going to be a little bit hard to pick up, but you know what? It's really cool that it's there, because if this thing has a failure of some sort, you at least have something you can jump up to and hopefully get a decent line of sight on. You can clearly see that there's 3 positions that you can articulate these to, so you can go from straight on to canted. So if you're a righty like myself, you can put these on the right-hand side, cant the rifle, and be able to look through this hopefully with your left eye. It's a nice little touch. But without a shadow or question of doubt, the party piece of this is the lever to control the magnification. It goes from 4x to 1x and back again as fast as you can possibly throw the lever. It's really, really slick. You pull down, flick back, pull down, flip forward, as fast as that. It really is lightning fast, and the action on this thing is very smooth and feels fantastic. It is awesome. What's even cooler is from the front, you can see this thing in action. So at 4x, we have a through hole. You have the glass at the back and the glass in the front, which is 4x. And once you rotate this into 1x, that come into place to make it 1x. So all you're doing is rotating a set of lenses inside 90 degrees. From being passive, it's just going through the exterior lenses to now having the lenses in between it to step it down to 1x. It's a really cool system, and one that I would assume wouldn't be that robust, but militaries have used these things for quite some time now, so I have no doubt that this thing will stand up to even the most aggressive sort of recoil from a machine gun. That's really it. I am a little worried about stuff getting caught in here and this thing not being able to get thrown and actuated, but other than that, it feels really good in hand. This is a cast aluminum of some sort, and it feels like I could just throw this against the wall and it would be fine. One last thing I did forget to mention is that you can get accessory plates for this and mount it on top or on the front. You could customize this however you want. They have RMR plates, they have pick rail plates, so you can mix and match this thing however you would like. But enough of this. Let's get behind this thing and see what it's actually like to use.
What in the wild, wild worlds of sports is going on around here?
is something you might be asking yourself, but what the fuck we're looking at? Well, that is the kill flash. Unfortunately, on camera, it looks like it is completely rendering this image useless.
Pew pew!
However, the naked eye can look past that a little bit easier than the camera can, and honestly, you don't notice it anywhere near as much at 1x.
Pew pew!
Fortunately, though, at 4x, it looks completely past it, and you can't see it whatsoever to the naked eye or with the camera, which is a very nice little touch. Unfortunately, though, here with the camera, it just wasn't a really good combination, so I take it off for the rest of this entire video. It is thankfully threaded on the front, and it comes off very easily, and I just throw that in my pocket and don't have to worry about it. One of the things that you might be questioning is, again, how much of the scope body are we
Pew pew!
really looking at here? And I will argue that it's not just the scope body,
Pew!
but it's also the scope caps that we see as well. So I'll be taking them off after this segment, and you'll see that the scope body itself slenders down a fair amount. Before we get there, however, let's take a look at the illumination, because it really is something to behold.
Pew pew!
Like I said in the unboxing section, this does illuminate either the red dot like we see here,
Pew pew!
or the entire reticle with the dial turned clockwise. So far though, this dot is absolutely beautiful.
Pew pew!
It becomes nuclear bright, and it's without a doubt the brightest prism, red dot, or LPVO dot I've ever seen on an optic. Alrighty then, let's talk a little bit more about this reticle. This one just so happens to be set up for 5.56 for their quote-unquote ballistic reticle, but you could also get it in 7.62, and I think that's going to be by 51. The nominal focus at 1x is going to be 70 meters, and at 4x is 150 meters, so something to take note of. It also has a 6 MOA center dot, so at 4x it should be 1.5 MOA. And the field of view at 1x is 146.3 feet, and at 4x 34.2 feet. We do see a fair amount of scope body, however, and I do have the eye relief basically perfect for where they say it is. Because this is technically two prisms in one, as we go from 1x to 4x, you'll see that the reticle does not change sizes, which means that the reticle is going to be on the second focal plane, which means that we should see the illumination no matter where we are behind the optic. And if you're wondering what the power cost is going to be for that red dot being so bright, on its maximum, they claim it's going to be about 380-ish hours. On its second red dot only brightness setting, they're rated for around 1700 hours. So if you're using this in the lower settings, it should last you quite some time. As far as illuminating the rest of the reticle, as you can clearly see here, on its maximum brightness, even in a pitch black environment, it's a little hard to pick up. However, it is a cool feature, and you can see it in lower light environments to the naked eye a little bit better than we can on camera. However, that dot is just stupid bright. All of the controls in this thing absolutely sound and feel top tier, and it's really cool to see how it shifts the windage and the elevation across its own body like that. One concern I do have, however, is dirt and debris getting caught between the body of the optic and the mount. I just feel like it could cause problems, either if you have to make an adjustment or even throw your zero completely off. Now would be time typically for a tracking test, but this being a 1 or a 4 in MOAs is not going to work out all too well. But you can see that it tracks up and down vertically fairly well, and it does so as well horizontally. What I'm more curious about is how well the arms levers return to 0. So, with that being said, let's set this thing up to the side and see how well that works.
Alright, and I'm actually going to leave it over here, because unlike other optics, this thing's got two arms QD levers on it. So what I'm going to do is remove it, starting with the front, then the rear. As you can see, it's loose. Push forward, rear, and then front. And that lines up really well. Let's do this 2 more times. 1 and 2. Clearly loose. Rear and front. Fantastic. Front and rear. Again, we are loose. Forward, rear, and then front. So as long as you're consistent, folks, if you're gonna constantly take this thing on and off, doesn't matter how you remove it, but when you put it back, make sure you push forward and then do the same levers in sequence.
Those arms levers are among the best QD devices I've got my hands on. Looking at the distortion against the power lines, it's a little hard to see from how much of the scope body we have just in our vision at all times. And you might be saying, well, see, I'm sure you could move it up a little bit and we can get a slightly better view out of it. Well, let's find that out, shall we? Let's move this one whole pixel farther forward at 1x, and you'll see we already have some deep shadows that are coming in at the 3 o'clock position. Moving it another pixel farther forward renders even more deep dark shadows that come in, as well as a lot more distortion to the glass. Moving it 4 fully forward, you can see it's very challenging to look through clearly. I move it back to its original position, and we're going to see how well it looks at 4x, because it's kind of important to go with the larger magnification. In fact, when you're setting your eye relief on most optics, you should be doing it in the highest magnification setting first. So here we are back where we originally started at 4x, and it's got a beautiful looking image. Pushing it 1 forward, you already see we have a lot of tunneling going on. So where we have it is the best we're going to get it. If I move it farther back, the image doesn't really degrade that much. However, we see a lot more of the scope body, and it just makes everything that much more challenging. Placing the Elcan back where it was and focusing our attention at our 30-yard power transformer here at 1x, we are greeted with a very good looking image. Though there is a touch of barrel distortion at the edges because there is a lot more glass that we're looking through at 1x as opposed to 4x, and that's going to be way more apparent later on. The illumination, however, touching on that really quick, is still absolutely incredible. I don't care who you are, it's the best illumination there is. Bringing this up to 4x, and you were greeted with the real meat and potatoes of this thing, a perfect image. It's a little hard to pick up here at 30 yards, but as you'll see later on when we start stretching this thing out, it is nothing short of phenomenal. And that's going to be one of the key talking points at the end when we get into my final thoughts. However, let's focus our attention here at our 400-yard brick building at 4x. Just take this sight in. There's so much color and vibrancy to everything that it really makes everything pop. It's actually quite reminiscent of the ZCO 4-20 that I just reviewed not too long ago, with just how stellar everything looks. Also note that everything in frame right now is in focus. That little tree that you see sticking up right there at the bottom at 6 o'clock, that's like 10 feet away. Followed by that rooftop at 35 yards, the tree line at 250, the brick building at 400, and the power lines and power towers all the way out there at friggin' 800 yards. It's just beautiful. And it should be beautiful for the price. For $2,000, this thing better perform flawlessly all the time. And so far, I have to say, it seems to do everything exceedingly well. Let's see if this thing still manages to let in a fair amount of light, even when the sun's gone well over the horizon. The late part of summer, early part of fall, about 8 o'clock, you can clearly see the sun has set. Illumination on the full reticle is just noticeable. Even here, it's just noticeable. You really need to be pitch black for have it be as bright as it really should be. Center dot illumination, it's too bright in most brightness settings. Here at 1x, the image looks pretty damn good, but at 4x, I reckon the image is actually brighter than it is at 1x. And again, the reason for this is there's just less glass in the way. It's only 2 lenses really at 4x, whereas with 1x, it's more. It's beautiful. There's nothing better than being at my home away from home on a bright, sunny, beautiful, crisp day. It's also the perfect place to show you just what I was talking about with the slight distortion at 1x. You can clearly see on the concrete wall, the image pulls towards the ends as opposed to what we see outside the body of the optic. Again, the reason for this is it's just going through a lot more glass, which we will be taking a look at very soon. With that being said, however, it still does a better job than most LPVOs, which is a great thing. We often find a lot of shift with LPVOs or a lot of pulling or distortion at the edges at 1x versus its higher magnification range. And that's something that's just naturally occurring in most lenses, whether it be a rifle scope or a camera lens. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this image from center to edge. It's beautiful, it's sharp, it's clear, it's bright, it's everything you could ask for. The only 1x performance that might be even on par with this as far as a quote-unquote prism goes would be the Primary Arms SLX Micro Compact 1x Prism. But that's a $250-ish optic versus a $2,000 optic. And that's only a 1x Prism, where this is a 1x and a 4x Prism. So this definitely has a leg up on that no matter how you look at it. Speaking of looking at it, let's see how well the iron sights line up here at that middle red target. Yeah, it looks pretty damn good when we scroll back down to its 4x. I'd say it's more than adequate enough to get a real quick shot on a man-sized target. So I've been mentioning this since the very beginning. That's 4x, this is 1x. Do you see a difference there? I do. At 4x you have just two lenses basically, at the rear and the front, and a giant tube going through it. At 1x here, they step it down with a lot of different lenses in between to have it be a 1x. So of course there's going to be way more distortion here at 1x and less light transfer. This being basically two prisms, a 1x and a 4x prism, functions completely differently than what you'd find in most other magnified optics. Let's namely say an LPVO. A 1 to 6 LPVO, the 1x is typically brighter than 6x. And the reason for that is, as you go up in magnification, typically the lenses get a little bit closer together and you have a little bit weird sort of light transfer issues, as well as exit pupils, which is typically why at 6x you're going to have a much smaller eyebox than you would at 1x. Speaking of eyebox, let's see how well this thing functions. You already have a little bit of a basic idea of how this thing is going to get when we're a little bit too far away from it. We do get a little bit of shadows creeping up specifically at the 3 o'clock position. No idea why that is. Probably that's where the illuminator is. However, because this is a prism, keep in mind the reticle is going to be basically in the second focal plane, which means that the illumination is visible off into the shadows, unlike other first focal plane LPVOs, or in fact any other first focal plane optic there is. Of course, the iron sights line up fairly close, which is awesome. Taking it up to 4x, and I bet you guys would be hard pressed to figure out if there's much of a difference here with the exit pupil as opposed to 1x. In fact, I think it might be a little bit better. I love the fact that you could see the illumination off into the shadows. Prisms are great for that regard. But here, just because there's fewer lenses in the way, the image just looks so friggin' good, bright, and very easy to get behind. Now let's compare this thing against some of its, well, I guess main-ish competitors, but this is two prisms in one as opposed to everything that I'm going to be showing you, which is just a single straight-up prism. The first one, of course, is the Steiner S432, which has a massive, massive image by comparison to basically everything I've looked through, with the exception of, I know, some ACOGs. I haven't gotten a real ACOG to review yet. Give me time. But here, both of these things at 4x, they both give us a very beautiful image. You can clearly see the Steiner has a much larger image because we could still see some of the scope body coming through from the Specter, albeit not that much. As beautiful as the image was for the S432 and as large as the image was looking through the damn thing with its field of view, I think I'd still have to give it to the Elcan Specter. Looking through it directly here at 300 yards at 4x is just something to behold. Again, just like the ZCO, it was an experience. Up next is the Vortex Spitfire HD 5X topped with a Vortex Venom 3MOA little micro red dot. This is sort of a similar concept to what the Elcan is doing, but the Elcan is just one unit. The nice thing about having a prism like that topped off with a micro red dot is you could change that out to whatever you want. But what really sucks is that when the battery dies like it did on the Venom that day that I was filming, you're left with nothing. It's useless. Take it off and throw it away. Despite the Spitfire having a pretty good image for a 5x prism, it doesn't even come close when comparing to the Elcan. The Elcan is leaps and bounds better in every regard when it comes to looking at it at its maximum magnification. The illumination as well. The Spitfire wasn't terrible, but the Elcan is just vastly superior. It outpaces it basically in every regard. However, if you want to have what the Elcan has in a smaller, less expensive package, you'd be going with something like the Spitfire topped off with a micro red dot, so it is fairly comparable. Last but not least is what I would probably personally go for, because that's what I run all the time, is my Steiner P4XI 1:4. Very similar to the Elcan, it has a 1x and a 4x, but also a 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, basically infinite amount of adjustability between 1x and 4x. As good as the image quality is on the P4XI, whether at 1x or 4x, I think it still has to go to the Elcan Specter. The Prism is just a more capable optic when it's designed properly to work at a certain magnification. This Elcan was designed specifically to be a better 4x than it is a 1x, and it shows. But it doesn't mean that the Steiner or optics like the Steiner are bad options. It's just you're going to be giving up things here and there. However, for the shortcomings that an LPVO has versus most prisms, I'd still much rather have that than a prism for my personal uses. And that's the perfect segue into my final thoughts and my conclusion on this absolute beast of a unit, this double prismed Elcan Specter 1.4. This is a very niche optic. Not saying that it's bad, but you have to be specifically looking for what this thing offers if you're even going to consider wanting to spend the $2,000+ that this thing costs. Now, to answer the question, is this thing worth its $2,000? From my perspective as a reviewer, as someone that's looking at this thing, not necessarily if I would buy it or not, but admiring what it is and testing it to see how well it's built, if it serves its purpose, I would say yes. This thing is made in Canada, comes with awesome Tenebrex caps. It doesn't have a great warranty. A lot of the ATI stuff is 5 years, but these Elcans is only 3 years. But this thing feels bulletproof. It's made out of a single cast housing. The mounting system on it is very robust. The arms levers on it are fantastic. The illumination is awesome. The fact that it gives you the option of a super bright center red dot or to illuminate the entire crosshair if you're using this thing in darker environments, or let's say with night vision. I'm sure with night vision, it looks fantastic. And the fact that you have a very good 1x and a perfect 4x. Just look at the image here at 4x. Yeah, I would say that it's worth its $2,000 price point. These have been used by militaries across the world for quite some time, and if that doesn't at least show that these things are capable of withstanding some abuse, then I really don't know what does, or I don't know how else to show it or express it to you guys. This thing is its own little thing, and if you want one, you know what you're getting before you even buy it. And you don't even care about my review. You're just going to go out there and you're going to buy it, whether it's this 1-4 or the 139 that they also offer. However, if you're on the fence about whether something like this might be up your alley, unless you're capable of spending $2,000 on this or on another combination of a prism and a micro red dot or on an LPVO and a mount, I'd really do a little bit of soul searching on your end to see if this is exactly what you want. Because once you get it, there's no going back. If you buy this thing for $2,000 and try to resell it, you're going to be taking a hell of a loss. And that's just the case with most optics. But I've seen that a lot of prisms sometimes don't do as well on the open market on resale as some other options. And that's absolutely something that you have to take into consideration. For me, I'm going to stick with my LPVOs. I don't even like red dots and magnifiers. They just don't work for me as well. But they might work for you. This might work for you. If I had an AR or maybe a machine gun, then yeah, I'd probably be able to throw this on top because I'd have funny money and wouldn't care. And it would just complete this very unique look. Because this is the first time, not only that I've got my hands on one to review or play with, but it's the first one I've ever seen in person, period. Granted, where I live, there isn't that much money, and if people do have the money to spend on optics, it's usually for F-class and stuff like that. Anyway, this is a phenomenal optic. Is it right for you? Only you can answer that question. What's better for you, an LPVO, a red dot, this prism? I can't answer that. But hopefully this video, along with a bunch of my other content, will help guide you in the correct direction as to what is going to be the most feasible choice for you. And on that note, a massive, massive thank you to Dave for sending this thing in for review. Dave, of course, works for ATI, and he's the gentleman that sent in the size 6 1:6 first focal plane that I reviewed quite some time ago. I didn't even know this thing was coming. It just showed up. So, Dave, thank you very much for entrusting me with your product. This has been an absolute wonderful experience and one that I hope gets topped very soon. Anyway, to all of you wonderful viewers out there, thank you all very much for watching. And congratulations. If you've watched this from start to finish, this is about a 30-minute long review, which is without a doubt the longest one yet. Have a drink on me. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.